You are listening to a special episode of Nobilis Erotica. This is Capricious by Julie Cox.
Breeder by Nikki Jameson. Avali tried not to stare at the bishop's rotten tooth, a black slice among the brown jumble of his other teeth, but it drew her gaze as his dry, cracked lips moved over it while he talked. The bishop's condition was the consequence of half a lifetime spent preaching on outlier planets and a lack of good general dental hygiene. The old balding priest beckoned Ava forward from the line of red-robed breeders, servants dedicated to the service of Kos, the god of childbirth and procreation. The bishop placed a warm, arthritic hand on Ava's shoulder and turned to the visitor, a man called Isaac. "Sister Avali has come to us from a convent on Tessaris," the bishop said. "She's in good shape?" "Very." The bishop gave Ava's shoulder a light squeeze. "Let me see her marks." Isaac's silky bass voice made Ava's heart drop into her stomach, and she faltered, averting her gaze from Isaac's face to the floor. "Certainly," the bishop said. Ava timidly pulled the wide sleeve of her red robe up to her elbow to show the 5 scars on the inside of her forearm. 2 X marks for the 2 miscarriages, 2 straight lines for the 2 stillbirths, and a circle with an arrow for the male child. "She's still young, not even 25 orbital cycles." The bishop's breath stank, and Ava jammed the tip of her tongue into the roof of her mouth, stifling her gag reflex. Isaac's lips pressed into a flat line, his brow furrowing in thought. From beneath the hood of her robe, Ava looked Isaac up and down, careful to avoid his eyes, evaluating him. His squared jaw was dusted with dark stubble, and his body appeared strong and lean from hard labor. Isaac's dark hair was silvered at the temples, and Ava reckoned he was at least 40 orbital cycles. Ava thought him handsome, and wondered what could cause him to consider her a worthy vessel for his offspring. She was not a beautiful woman. Her hair was the color of dishwater and lusterless. Her eyes were doe-like and too wide set. Her breasts were small and her hips narrow. Archer, the noble whom she serviced on Tessaris, had made it abundantly clear that she had only been selected because of her lack of beauty in comparison to his noble and beloved Sarah, who was desperate for a child but afraid of the pain of birth. 5 pounds of salt, and I'll send milk to the convent thrice a week." "Done." The bishop and Isaac shook hands. Isaac pushed Ava's trunk of belongings up against the back of the wagon and offered his hand to help her step into the wagon. Ava's heart skittered in her chest and her cheeks flushed with color when she touched his work-roughened fingers. Nothing like the silk-soft hands she was used to. The nobility of Tessaris rarely worked, and those that crafted with their hands did things like paint and draw. "You blush easily, Avali," Isaac said, once Ava was situated. Ava's color deepened in her cheeks, heat spreading into her chest. "I'm delighted to have been chosen to service you, sir." Isaac's mouth pressed into a grim line as he climbed into the seat beside her. "Call me Isaac." He trained his eyes forward and flicked the reins. "Ava," she said. A bay draft trotter pulled the wagon over the rutted roads of the outpost town that surrounded the convent, across the covered bridge to the west, and followed the winding road that ran parallel to the river. Ava watched the horse move smoothly, reddish fur turning to liquid gold as it caught the sunlight streaming through the leafless trees. Ava pulled her robe tighter around to ward off the cold. She had heard the other breeders talk about the frigid winters on Rondur 9, but Ava was looking forward to seeing snow. something she'd never experienced in her life on the mild, climated planet of Tesaris. "I look forward to sharing the love of Kos with you, sir." Ava tried to break the uncomfortable wall of silence between she and Isaac. Isaac snorted. "I don't need your damned religion." Ava saw the muscles of his neck strain as he clenched his jaw. A hot jolt of lust shot through her belly, and she shifted in her seat. A moment passed before Isaac spoke again, his voice softer. "I've got no interest in your sacred chalice." "Then why?" Ava let the question drift away like the white wisps of her breath in the cold.
"There's more than one way to serve. I need you to take care of my son,"
Isaac said. "Oh," Ava furrowed her brow. "How old is he?"
2 orbits,
Isaac said.
"I can't watch him and work at the same time. Levi, my older boy, he helps, but I could better use him as a second pair of hands to tend the chores, not babysit Maddox all the time."
"What of the vessel?" Ava asked of the breeder who carried and birthed his children.
"Gone."
Isaac's lip curled up over his white teeth in a snarl of disgust. Ava felt the chill of his anger and crossed her arms over herself as a shield.
"So why did you leave Tesaris?"
Isaac's question startled Ava. "I was called by Kos," Ava said.
Isaac frowned. "That's bullshit. I've seen your marks."
Ava gripped the edge of her seat, relishing the strain of her skin across her knuckles, and chose to forgive Isaac for the snide remark. "Why did you come to Rondur 9? She asked.
"Same reason most every other man did. New land and black diamonds."
Isaac urged the horse to go faster with a snap of the reins. The trotter picked up its pace, and the wagon lurched forward.
"Funny, though, I've been on this planet for 4 orbits, and haven't found so much as 1 stone."
"There are other things, yes?" Ava asked.
"Sure. Plenty of salt, iron, and copper. There's lumber, game, and there's no shortage of unexplored territory,"
Isaac said. He threw her a sideways glance, and she caught a glimpse of his clear blue eyes rimmed by dark lashes. The corner of his supple mouth turned up into a sly smirk. Ava flushed and cleared her throat, turning to look at the road ahead of them. The two bumped along as the silence stretched out again. The glittering sunlight filtered through the trees, gradually warming the air, but not quite enough to completely stifle the chill. Ava blew air from her mouth, watching the white puff race into the air and dissipate a second later. A farmhouse drew into sight. The 2-story homestead was painted white, with a red tin roof and dark green shutters on the windows. A wide porch disappeared around the side, and about 100 yards behind the house stood a weather-beaten barn with a pitched roof. Beyond that, Ava could see the sun glinting on the wide river slowly drifting past. "I'm promised to your service for salt and milk, Isaac," Ava said, eyeing the house. The white paint was chipping in places, and as they drew closer she could see wide swatches of the wood beneath and rust stains under the eaves, a sign of harsh weather, lack of upkeep, or both.
"I hope you're worth your salt, Ava,"
Isaac said. Ava hoped she was too. The wagon halted in front of the house. Isaac alighted and offered his hand to help Ava down from the wagon. As their fingers touched, Ava felt the same warm lightness flutter through her as before. She breathed slowly, trying to calm her racing heart. Isaac gazed at Ava's face, and she found herself mesmerized by the sky-blue eyes, flecked with darker hues. She bent down tempted to place her lips upon his, to feel the soft warmth and the cold, but Isaac turned his head and the moment ended.
"Levi!"
Isaac shouted toward the house. A young boy appeared on the porch with a toddler in tow.
"My sons, Levi and Maddox. Boys, this is Ava."
Both boys had the dark hair and blue eyes of their father. Levi was as tall and spindly, still obviously growing into himself. He nodded in greeting and stooped to pick up Maddox before the babe wandered out of reach. "Ma'am," Levi said. Maddox twisted and squirmed, a futile attempt to escape his brother's grasp. Isaac retrieved Ava's trunk and put it on the porch floor.
"Go ahead, show her around. I'll take care of the wagon and bring this in when I come."
Isaac slapped the side of the trunk lid, making a hollow thump. Ava followed Levi through each room of the house as he pointed them out. The kitchen, larder, sitting room, and dining room were on the first level. At the top of the staircase were 3 bedrooms and a small bathroom with a water closet and a clawfoot bathtub. "This is where you'll sleep." Levi towed a mattress lying on the floor beside the crib in Maddox's nursery. "Pa hasn't finished making the frame for your bed yet." Maddox began to whine and push away from Levi's grip with more ferocity. Levi set his brother down on the floor and knelt beside him, picking up various toys and attempting to keep the toddler from throwing a fit. "You're not going to leave like the others, are you?" Levi asked. "Others?" Ava lowered herself to the floor, picking up a ring of wooden beads and shaking it in Maddox's direction. The baby laughed and clapped his hands. "Yeah." Levi brushed dark curls from his eyes and gazed at Ava. "You're the 4th breeder in 3 months. All the others get called away." He air-quoted the last 2 words for emphasis. "That's an unfair question to ask, Levi. I've not even been here for half an hour." Ava smiled at Maddox, who had gathered a fistful of her robe and was tugging at it, making happy cooing noises. "It is fair. Papa don't need to be hurt no more." Levi stood up and brushed imaginary dirt from the front of his pants. "I've got chores to get to." Ava turned back to Maddox once Levi was gone. The boy smiled and crawled into Ava's lap. Her heart ached for the dead female children and the baby boy on Tesaurus. He would have a good life, the soft-handed life of a noble, but that knowledge never eased the hurt. She looked down at the small child in her lap. Surely Kos had called her to where his love was needed. Ava scrubbed the bottom of the soup pot with the dishcloth. Isaac stood beside the sink, towel in hand at the ready to dry, and put away the dishes that Ava handed him. She had made soup for dinner from canned vegetables, potatoes, and salted pork she'd found in the larder, and after eating, Isaac had offered to help Ava clean up.
"Can you make a list after we're done with the dishes?"
Isaac asked. Ava turned her head and caught a glimpse of the tip of his tongue running along his lower lip. Her mouth went dry, and she wondered how Isaac's full, sensuous lips would feel when pressed against her own. "A list?" She set the soup pot down on the counter.
"Yes. Levi and I will go back into town and get you whatever you want to stock the larder. The weather is snapping cold, and I want to get ahead of the ice and snow."
"I've never seen snow." Ava's lips broke into a wide grin.
"It snows here every winter, and the river freezes up. Kind of balances out, though. By the time you're sick of cold, it starts getting on summer,"
Isaac said. Ava shook her head. "Tesaurus doesn't have much difference between the seasons. It stays about the same temperature all year round."
"I've never been. What's it like?"
Isaac asked. He slowly dried the pot, his blue eyes trained on Ava's face. She colored and turned back to the dishes. "It's beautiful. There are trees lining the city streets, so everything is lush and green, and the skyscrapers are made from stones with every color imaginable. The ocean sparkles like sapphires. It's like living inside of a bubble, looking through the fragile iridescence. Ava sighed. She missed her home planet.
Did you know any nobles?
Isaac asked. Ava nodded. Yes, I served in a noble's house before I came to Rondur 9. She frowned. Silence enveloped them, the only sound the clicking of silverware being dried. Ava handed Isaac a glass. Their fingertips brushed and Ava's breath caught. She cleared her throat. You were right.
About?
Isaac arched an eyebrow. I wasn't called here by Kos. I needed to leave Tersaris. Isaac said nothing. His expression softened, the corners of his mouth turned down, and he looked at her quizzically, urging her to continue. I left because of the nullification laws the government want to pass. Ava watched Maddox's sippy cup top bob up and down beneath the dish suds. Nullification, the practice of terminating a fetus based on sex, was a grievous wrong to the followers of Kos. They want to mandate the process for population control.
You won't have to worry about that here. Not enough people on this rock,
Isaac said quietly. Ava looked at her marks, the 2 straight lines. The prick at the corner of her eyes couldn't be helped. She sniffled and turned her face away. Isaac's strong fingers wound around Ava's wrists, and he removed her hands from the water, drying them gently with the towel. His thumb brushed the inside of her arm, trailing over the 2 lines that marked the stillborn children in her past. Isaac leaned down and kissed each one. His lips were soft, and despite her sadness, Ava felt liquid heat gather in her womanhood. The noble Rashka didn't want female children, Ava said. She swiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. Isaac drew her into his chest, his strong arms enveloping her. Ava inhaled deeply, smelling pine, sunlight, and the heady scent of a hard-working man. She rested her head against him, feeling all the old pain spin away. Maddox began to cry upstairs. Ava tore herself from Isaac's embrace. In the morning, endless gray clouds were painted across the sky, dimming the sunlight and softening the world. Before he and Levi left for town, Isaac told Ava that the riverbank had begun freezing, and he expected that it would start to snow by the late afternoon. The snow began well before then. Ava occupied her time by cleaning the house whenever Maddox didn't require her immediate attention. More often than clean, though, she would stop and watch the gigantic fluffy flakes gather in white tufts on every surface they touched. The bottom step of the porch had disappeared beneath the layer of snow that covered the ground before the wagon returned. Levi came into the house first. Ava came out of the kitchen and grumbled. The boy had removed his wet clothing and left it in a heap at the base of the stairs, and now melting snow and dirt puddled on the floor she had mopped half an hour ago. She gathered the wet bundle and turned to take the garments upstairs, to hang them over the side of the bathtub to dry. She spun around at the sound of the front door banging shut. Isaac dropped a load of firewood into the iron bin by the door. He took off his snow-covered coat and hat and hung them on the wall peg. He lifted the hem of his sweater and undershirt and pulled the fabric up over his head. Dark curly hair dusted his chest, and a trail ran from his navel and slipped beneath the waistband of his pants. Ava froze and cursed the heartbeat thrumming through her loins. She knew that she should turn away from Isaac, but she expected if she tried, her suddenly wobbling knees would buckle. Isaac toed out of his boots and set them neatly by the firewood bin. Ava watched the strong muscles of his back ripple beneath his skin as he took his belt off. Isaac worked the button of his pants loose, and when she heard his zipper undone, she drew in a sharp breath. Isaac whirled around, his pants undone and his wet shirts balled up in one hand.
"Oh, shit, Ava, I didn't know you were there."
Her eyes had been drawn to the tuft of dark hair and navy blue waffle of his long johns that his undone pants revealed. She looked away quickly. "Do you want me to hang up your clothes to dry?" Her gaze drew back to his crotch and flitted away again as her face colored crimson.
"Yes,"
he said. Isaac shimmied out of his pants and balled them up with his shirts. He added his clothes to the pile she already held.
"Thank you."
He paused when his hand brushed the outside of her arm. Ava drew in her breath through her slightly parted lips and held it. Isaac leaned in a bit, catching her chin in his grasp and tilting her face upwards towards his. She peered into the depths of his blue eyes. His eyes were soft, studying her. The calloused pad of his thumb stroked lightly along her jaw. If she leaned forward just a little, their lips would... Isaac cleared his throat, ending the moment.
"I'd better get some dry clothes on."
He disappeared upstairs. The next morning, Ava awoke to a world blanketed in white. She made coffee, eggs, and bacon for Isaac, Levi, and herself. Levi came through and grabbed a handful of bacon before heading outside to tend to the horse. Isaac ate silently, watching Maddox in his high chair get more warm porridge on his bib than in his mouth, as Ava tried to feed him. "Want to go play in the snow?" Ava baby talked, a spoonful of porridge balanced close to Maddox's closed mouth. "You have to eat if you want to go play."
"I don't think he's quite old enough to understand that,"
Isaac said ruefully. Maddox opened wide and accepted most of the food. Ava smirked at Isaac, then frowned as Maddox spit out 3/4 of what she'd gotten into his mouth in the first place. Isaac chuckled low in his throat, a sound that made Ava's belly flutter with want. She gnawed her lower lip. "He gets to go out and play anyway, because I want to go outside and play in the snow." She gathered the sticky toddler from the high chair and went upstairs to clean and dress him for the weather. Ava was not entirely prepared for the cold, wet snow, and neither were her clothes. The breeder red dye in her wool coat, dress, petticoats, and long underwear stained the snow shades of pink. She thought perhaps she should have washed her winter clothes a time or two more to get out the excess color. She walked a bit past the barn where Isaac and Levi had not yet tromped through the cold white powder and put Maddox down on his feet. The babe promptly fell on his bottom. He squealed with delight and began patting at the snow with his mitten-covered hands. Ava picked up a powdery handful and tossed it into the air, making it snow over the two of them. Maddox pushed himself up to standing and threw snow in the air, hollering, "Up!" and other baby nonsense. "Make a snow angel, Maddox," Ava said, laying down on her back and moving her arms and legs in the snow. She stood up to admire her work, a berry red angel with a pink skirt and wings, and screamed. Maddox was toddling towards the river, still throwing handfuls of snow in the air. Ava bolted after him, calling his name. Behind her, Isaac sprinted from the barn, yelling for her to catch the boy. Ava yelled for the toddler again, but her voice caught between ragged breaths, her heart pounding in her ears as she pushed her legs to run faster in her stupid heavy dress. Ava grabbed Maddox by the arm when he slipped and fell. She hauled the toddler up from the ground into her hip. "You are fast," she said breathlessly.
Ava?
Isaac's voice engulfed her with a new terror. He stood 50 or so yards away, holding his hands up.
Don't move.
She heard a loud pop, like wood cracking, and the ground beneath her swayed a little. Ava looked down, and the realization hit. She was standing on the frozen part of the river. Ava looked at Isaac. His eyes were wider than hers.
Stay calm,
he commanded. Ava nodded, clutching Maddox closer to stop his squirming.
Put Maddox down.
Ava shook her head.
Do it,
he ordered.
Get Maddox off the ice. Then you follow. Slow-like.
Ava's back was tensed with fear as she leaned and gingerly set Maddox on his feet. Ava turned her terrified eyes to Levi, who had come running up with a coil of rope.
Maddox, come to me.
Isaac squatted down in the snow and opened his arms, gesturing for the boy to walk toward him. Maddox toddled, and Ava's heart lurched into her throat. With each of the child's steps, the ice popped dangerously beneath his tiny boots. When he was close enough, Isaac snatched his son from the ice and held him fiercely. Isaac handed Maddox to Levi and said something to his son that Ava couldn't hear. He turned back to Ava.
Tie the rope around your waist and walk in carefully.
Isaac hollered from the riverbank and made ready to throw the rope. Ava nodded, and there was a bone-jarring crack, and the world spun sideways. 1,000 hot needles pricked her skin at once, forcing air from her lungs. The water around her was turning pink and then red. Ava had fallen into the cold river. She struggled to kick for the surface, but the weight of her clothes sucked at her legs, immobilizing them. Ava pounded against the ice above her head with her fist. Her lungs ached with cold and air. She needed air. Her vision dimmed, and she opened her mouth to scream for help. Her limbs would no longer move, and her body began to sink to the bottom of the river. The world went dark. Ava coughed, choking up a mouthful of river water. Her eyes flew open at the welcome sting of cold air in her lungs.
Good. Ava, breathe.
Isaac's face floated into view. He held her close, his hands rubbing fast along her arms and shoulders. Maddox? She stuttered the question.
Inside with Levi. Let's get you inside,
he said, as he cradled Ava in his arms and lifted her from the snowy ground. So sorry. Ava shivered against Isaac's firm body.
I know.
Isaac held her tighter. Ava let the world blur in and out of focus. Nestled next to Isaac's face, she felt the rough stubble prick her cheek. The sudden warmth of the house made her joints ache and her skin sting. She heard a voice, but could distinguish no words. Why hadn't Isaac put her down? She could walk and tried to move, but her limbs refused to obey. Ava moaned as someone began tugging on one arm, then another.
Start a fire,
she heard Isaac say. Hands rubbed up and down her arms and legs, and her skin felt the pain of thousands of tiny needles poking and scraping along. Her eyes fluttered open. She didn't recognize the room. Where? She began to form the question inside of her sluggish brain.
Shh, Isaac said. Rest.
A blanket was tucked up around her shoulders, and Isaac was still holding her close. He was warm and smelled of river water and wood smoke. Ava opened her eyes and turned over, her body sore and stiff. The room was dim, a low fire in the fireplace providing the only light. She lay in a bed with Isaac, his arms wrapped around her waist. She didn't recognize any of the surroundings at first, and it took a moment before she realized she was in Isaac's room. Isaac wore no shirt, and she felt the whisper of his chest hair against her naked back. Where were her clothes? Ava scanned the room but didn't see them anywhere. She remembered the ice breaking and pitching her into the frigid water. Isaac must have removed her wet clothing and then crawled into bed with her to warm her up with his own body heat. Ava smiled and snuggled back against his strong chest. Her rump brushed against his flaccid penis, and she gasped as his member stiffened some. Isaac stirred, his arms tightening around her, and he pulled her close, inhaling the scent of her hair.
I was afraid you might die.
His lips brushed against the outer ridge of her ear. How long? His erect cock was pressing against the small of her back, and it broke her concentration. She swallowed to regain composure. How long have I been asleep?
Most of the day.
Isaac's fingers tangled into her hair, and when she turned to look at him, Ava saw the look on his face. Fascination, admiration, a bit of both. Isaac's rough fingers moved her hair from her shoulder, and his teeth grazed the sensitive flesh of her neck. Ava sighed, letting Isaac's lips wander along her body. She sighed as heat gathered between her thighs. With his index finger, Isaac traced the line of her clavicle and down her sternum along her bare chest. His hand skimmed around the soft mound of her breast, thumb lightly caressing her areola, teasing the nipple. The flat of Isaac's palm skirted over the curve of Ava's hip and rested on the top of her bare thigh. She took his hand, twining their fingers together to halt him. I thought you had no interest in my sacred chalice or my damn religion. She searched his eyes.
I want more than that. I want you, Ava. All of you.
His lips found hers, soft. She released his hand, guiding it down along her thigh toward the crevice in between. Ava sighed, opening to him. His tongue plundered her mouth, seeking out her sweetness, as his fingers skimmed along the outer lips of her womanhood. Isaac tasted glorious, like coffee with cinnamon. She arched against him, pressing her body against his, moaning at the brush of his curly chest hair against her hot skin. One of his long fingers worked inside her, then another, stroking. Isaac's rough thumb found her swollen clit and began working in circles around the delicate nub, drawing wetness out. His kisses dropped lower, brushing along her jaw and down the center of her throat, whispering over her collarbone and down over her torso. Ava squirmed at his maddeningly slow descent across her soft belly and down to her slick slit. He nosed into her pubic hair, inhaling the raw want. She moaned and arched her back, offering herself to him. Isaac's tongue slid between her plump lips, flicking over her clit in tandem with his fingers. A low moan started in the back of her throat and rose in pitch as Isaac took her body higher and higher into ecstasy. One sure flick of his finger thrust her over the precipice, and Ava crashed. Waves of orgasm swept over her, leaving her pussy pulsing and quivering. Isaac loomed over her and positioned himself between her thighs. His mouth came down on hers as his cock plunged into her depths. Her womanhood was still pulsing from her climax as he filled her, stretching her open to a new cycle of sensation. They moved in rhythm, and Ava felt herself being spun higher again. She held tightly, feeling the muscles of his back flex beneath his sweat-slicked skin. Isaac's fingers tangled into Ava's hair, and he pressed his forehead against hers. He watched her eyes as he thrust with greater passion. Ava's mouth opened, and she cried out as he did, both of them swirling and crashing together. Isaac stilled, his cock pulsing as he emptied into her tight channel. Isaac kissed Ava softly on the mouth, on each pink cheek, and on her forehead. He rolled on his side and gathered her in his arms. She lay with her head resting on his shoulder. "Am I worth my salt?" she asked once her breathing had slowed to normal.
"More,"
he said. "Why did the other breeders leave?"
"I'm not sure, really,"
Isaac said. He reached back and fluffed his pillow, considering what to say.
"They were too used to just being incubators."
"Not you, though. I see it in your eyes, Ava." He kissed her.
"You're more than a vessel. You're a mother."
You have been listening to Capricious by Julie Cox, narrated by Nobilis Reed. This file is released under a Creative Commons Attribution No Derivatives license. Thank you for listening.